I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped outside that morning. The air felt too still, the street too quiet. Then I saw my mailbox split in two like a broken limb, lying in the ditch with letters scattered across the grass. At first, I thought maybe some teenagers were fooling around, or maybe a delivery truck clipped it by mistake. But as I bent down to gather the torn envelopes, I noticed the clean tire marks on the curb. This wasn't an accident. Somebody had aimed for it. I stared at the wreckage in disbelief. The sun just beginning to rise over the roofs of our neighborhood. It was the kind of neighborhood people paid extra for, the kind where lawns stayed neatly trimmed. Fences matched, and the HOA dictated everything from the shade of your shutters to how tall your grass could grow. A perfect picture on the outside, but behind those trimmed hedges lived tension. Whispers and silent wars. And in the center of all that was Karen. She lived 3 houses down. In the big white colonial with blue shutters and the perfect flower beds that she made her landscaper redo 3 times a season, she was the kind of neighbor who walked around with a clipboard during HOA meetings, pointing out whose trash can wasn't pulled in fast enough, or whose fence paint didn't look fresh. I'd managed to avoid crossing her path for years, but I'd seen the way she spoke to others, with a smile that never reached her eyes, and a tone that could cut like glass still. I didn't want to believe she was behind this. Not yet. I set the broken post aside, fixed my letters as best I could, and told myself maybe it really was an accident. Mailboxes can be replaced. No point making enemies where you don't need them. But deep down, something in my gut told me the truth was uglier than that. A week later, the truth slammed into me like a freight train. It was a Wednesday evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I had just finished mowing my lawn when I heard the crunch of gravel down the street. I looked up and saw her SUV, a shiny black beast that always seemed too big for our narrow road, rolling slowly past my house. Karen was behind the wheel, sunglasses on, even though the sun was nearly gone. I froze when I saw her angle toward my curb. And then it happened. She didn't even hesitate. She swerved, clipped the side of my brand new mailbox, and sent it tumbling like it was made of cardboard. The sound of wood splintering echoed in my chest. She kept driving. Not fast, not panicked, just casually, like it was part of her evening routine. And in the rearview mirror, swear I saw the corner of her mouth curl into a smirk, my fists clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. I wanted to run after her, to scream in the middle of the street, to demand why she did it. But instead, I stood there in silence, heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. That was the moment I realized it wasn't random. Karen had chosen me. I didn't know why. I paid my HOA dues on time. I kept my lawn tidy. I didn't throw loud parties or break any rules. Maybe she didn't like the way my shutters weren't quite as glossy as hers. Maybe she didn't like the way I kept to myself instead of bowing to her authority. Or maybe she just enjoyed having someone to torment. Whatever the reason, it was clear. I was her new target. The next day, I called the HOA office. I explained what happened, gave them the times, even described the car. But instead of help, I got brushed aside. "Do you have proof?" The woman on the phone asked, her voice flat and bored. "Proof?" She hit my mailbox twice. I snapped. "Maybe it was an accident," she replied. "Cars back up all the time. And unless you have a recording, there's nothing we can do." That was when I felt the walls closing in. Karen didn't just live in this neighborhood, she ran it. Everyone knew it, even if they didn't say it out loud. She was friends with the board members, donated to the HOA's little pet projects, and hosted their summer barbecues. She could get away with anything. That night, as I swept up the shards of my second destroyed mailbox, I couldn't stop replaying the look on her face as she drove away. Calm, smug, like she owned me. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. I told myself I'd replace the mailbox again. But not just with another flimsy post and box that she could take out with a flick of her steering wheel. No, this time I'd build something different. Something she couldn't break. Something that would wipe that smug look off her face once and for all. At the time, I didn't know just how far I was willing to go. But I knew one thing for certain: Karen had picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. The next morning, I woke with a tight knot in my chest. My mind kept replaying the image of Karen's smirk as she drove off after smashing my mailbox. I felt exposed, like a mark she had chosen to torment, and worse, completely powerless. I knew I couldn't stay quiet, but the more I thought about confronting her directly, the more I realized how dangerous that could be. This wasn't just a mean-spirited neighbor. It was someone who knew exactly how to play the system. And she had allies. I decided to go through the HOA, hoping that reason and proof would be enough. I printed photos of the crushed mailbox, the tire marks on the curb, and even the bent steel posts that had been my first attempt at reinforcing it. I drafted an email that carefully outlined everything, hoping professionalism would earn me some support. The reply came the next day, after review. The board finds insufficient evidence to take action. Perhaps consider placing your mailbox differently. Thank you for your cooperation. That's when I realized just how deep her reach went. Insufficient evidence, I muttered under my breath. I had photos, times even a witness, the delivery man who had to hop over the wreckage to drop packages. But the HOA had already made up their minds. Karen's influence was undeniable. I walked around the neighborhood that afternoon, pretending to water my lawn, but really I was watching her. She was outside trimming her hedges, humming as if nothing had happened, checking over her shoulder occasionally. When she spotted me, she smiled the same smug smile and waved. It wasn't friendly. It was a victory wave. I wanted to run up to her, shake her by the shoulders, demand answers. But I didn't. I had to be smarter than her. Fighting her head-on would only make things worse. She thrived on control and fear. I had to find a way to level the playing field without breaking the rules she loved so much. Over the next few days, things escalated. My mailbox didn't just get hit anymore, it became a target for messages. Small things at first: letters ripped open, flyers shoved inside, soaked with water, even a rock one morning. And each time Karen drove by slowly, making sure I saw her. The intimidation was deliberate. I could feel her watching me from every angle. When I watered the lawn, when I took out the trash, even when I got the mail before the morning sun, I started noticing subtle signs of her influence elsewhere too. The neighbor 2 doors down, normally friendly, suddenly stopped waving at me. Another neighbor mumbled something about keeping the peace whenever I tried to talk. It was like a wall was closing around me, isolating me while Karen tightened her grip on the street. The HOA meetings were worse. She would sit at the front, clipboard in hand, and I could feel her eyes burning into me whenever anyone spoke. Any small complaint I raised about the mailbox got drowned out by her comments, or dismissed as trivial. One evening, I caught her speaking to the HOA president in hushed tones on the sidewalk. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the nods, the slight bows of acknowledgement. It made my stomach churn. She had the system in her favor, and I was the only one who saw the truth. The unfairness of it made my anger grow, not the kind of anger you can vent with words, but the kind that burns quietly, shaping your next move. And that's when I realized if I wanted to stop this, I couldn't rely on anyone else. The HOA, the neighbors, they weren't going to protect me. Karen had made sure of that. I had to do it myself. I had to take control of my own little piece of land, my own mailbox, my own life. But I also knew it wouldn't be easy. Karen didn't play fair. She thrived on rules and loopholes, and she knew exactly where the line could be pushed without consequences. If I made a move too soon, I risked her escalating things even further. I needed a plan, one that would make her think twice about ever targeting me again. One that couldn't be broken or intimidated away. I began researching, quietly, obsessively. Mailbox laws, HOA regulations, reinforced posts, vandalism-proof designs. Every evening, I spread out papers across my kitchen table, measuring, sketching, calculating. I didn't just want a mailbox. I wanted a fortress, a symbol of standing my ground without giving her the satisfaction of seeing me panic or plead. But as I worked, the emotional weight of the situation settled on me. I felt fear, yes, but also frustration, humiliation, and a surprising thrill. There was a fight ahead of me, and for the first time in months, I felt alive in a way I hadn't expected. The stakes were high. Karen wasn't just anyone. I was taking on the most ruthless, manipulative neighbor I had ever met, and I had no backup. Still, despite the tension, one thought kept me awake at night. She thought she had one. She thought she had power over me, and soon. She was going to learn how wrong she was. It happened on a Saturday morning, the kind that usually feels calm and ordinary. The sun had barely peeked over the rooftops, and the air was crisp with the scent of cut grass. I stepped outside with a cup of coffee, ready to finally enjoy a moment of peace, only to find my brand new mailbox shattered in pieces. Lying in the dirt like a discarded toy, I froze. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. 3 mailboxes. 3 attempts at keeping my small corner of this street intact, and Karen had taken every single one down. This time, there was no doubt in my mind. It was deliberate, personal. And then I saw her. She was parked a little down the road. Leaning against her SUV, sunglasses perched just so, a smug smirk painted across her face. She waved casually as if she were greeting a neighbor. My neighbor, while the ruins of my mailbox lay behind me. My hands shook, my coffee sloshing over the rim, dripping down the side of my cup. Rage, fear, humiliation, it all hit at once. I wanted to run to her, to scream, to demand why she kept targeting me. But I didn't. I stayed frozen on the curb, the wind catching my hair as I clenched my fists. I realized something terrifying. This had become bigger than a mailbox. She wasn't just attacking a piece of wood. She was attacking me. Every glance, every intentional hit, every casual display of superiority was all calculated. She wanted to prove she could control me. And until that moment, she had succeeded. Later, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the shards, trying to piece together my next move. The HOA wouldn't help. The neighbors were either too afraid to intervene or too loyal to her. Every option I had seemed blocked by her influence. And yet, I couldn't let her win, not this time. I started thinking about how long this had been going on. The small signs I had ignored at first, the way she always parked too close when I pulled in, the way she commented on every minor imperfection in my yard, the whispers to other neighbors that always made me feel like an outsider. At first, it seemed like harmless meddling. But now, it was obvious. Karen had been sizing me up all along. She didn't just want a mailbox to smash. She wanted to prove she could break me, piece by piece, without leaving a trace she could be blamed for. I felt a mix of fear and determination settling over me. Fear, because she was relentless and ruthless. Determination, because I knew I couldn't keep living under her shadow. This had gone too far, and if I wanted to take back my life, I had to act smarter than she ever imagined. That afternoon, I began planning. Not impulsively, not out of anger, but with precision. I went online researching reinforced posts, vandalism-proof designs, and legal protections. I measured, calculated, and sketched. I thought about what she thrived on, the rules, the loopholes, the sense of power she wielded over the neighborhood. I realized that I could use that against her. If I built something stronger, smarter, untouchable by her SUV or her influence, I could take back what was mine without stooping to the petty cruelty she practiced as I worked late into the evening. Hammer in hand and plans spread across my kitchen table, I couldn't stop thinking about her. About that smirk. About the way she thought she owned this street. And more importantly, about how I was going to make sure she never felt that way again. But even as I felt the first sparks of hope, a pang of doubt gnawed at me. What if she escalated further? What if this wasn't just about the mailbox anymore? What if she started targeting other parts of my life? My car, my yard, even my reputation? Karen didn't just break things. She broke people. I had to anticipate every possible move, plan for every reaction, and stay one step ahead. Otherwise, the neighborhood's queen would win again. And this time, the cost might be more than just a mailbox. Then came the subtle twist that made the situation feel unavoidable. A neighbor, someone I barely knew, slipped a note under my door one evening. It was small, folded carefully, with words that made my stomach turn. Be careful. Karen doesn't stop at mailboxes. She watches everything. Watch yourself. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't paranoia. This was a warning. She wasn't just playing games. She was stalking, calculating, waiting for the right moment to push me over the edge. And the truth hit me harder than ever. I had no choice. I couldn't stay passive. I couldn't hope that the HOA or the neighborhood would protect me. If I wanted peace, if I wanted to stop this nightmare, I had to fight on my own terms. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the note, my sketches, and the broken mailboxes lined up in my garage. The anger was still there, but now it was sharpened into something precise, something focused. I wasn't just replacing a mailbox anymore, I was building a statement, a symbol that I would not be bullied, that I would not be intimidated, that Karen's reign over me was ending. And deep down, I knew one thing: the next time she came for me, I would be ready. The battle was no longer avoidable. It was inevitable. I spent the next few nights pacing my kitchen, staring at the broken mailboxes and trying to imagine a way out of this nightmare. Every option felt dangerous, every plan risky. Karen wasn't just a petty neighbor, she was a strategist. She thrived on control, on humiliation, on making people feel powerless. And for months, she had made me feel exactly that. But then a thought struck me, sharp and clear. If she was playing a game, I had to change the rules. I couldn't just replace my mailbox with another fragile post. I had to build something she couldn't destroy, something untouchable. Something that would make her rethink ever trying again. The problem was, I had no idea where to start. Mailbox designs online were either tiny and useless or massive and ridiculous. I wanted strength, but I also needed it to blend in with the neighborhood. If it looked too unusual, Karen would find a new way to harass me, or worse, use the HOA as a weapon. I needed subtle genius. I started researching obsessively. Steel-reinforced posts, concrete footings, vandal-proof locks, legal setbacks. HOA rules every night. I pored over diagrams, measurements, and tutorials. I sketched and sketched, adjusting angles, testing hypothetical forces in my mind. This wasn't just a mailbox anymore. It was going to be my fortress, my silent victory, and a symbol that she didn't get to win anymore. Then, one evening, something happened that changed everything. I was gathering supplies at the hardware store, imagining the design in my mind when I felt it gaze. That familiar, sharp, calculating look that made my blood run cold. I turned slowly, and there she was, Karen, right in aisle 5. Leaning against the shelving with that same smug smile I had come to hate. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, though my pulse raced. She tilted her head as if she had all the time in the world. "Shopping," she said, voice smooth, too smooth. "I could ask the same about you. Buying supplies for your next little mailbox experiment." My stomach sank. How did she know? Had someone told her? Was she following me? The fear crept in, cold and heavy. But beneath it, a spark of defiance ignited. She thought she had me cornered. She thought she could intimidate me anywhere, even in the hardware store. But I wasn't backing down. "I'm renovating," I said, keeping my tone steady. "You know, home improvements." She laughed softly, a sound that grated against my nerves. "Home improvements, huh? I hope it's sturdy this time." Would hate for another accident. Her words were thinly veiled threats, and they hit harder than I expected. I felt a mix of fear and fury, but something else, too: clarity. That interaction, that confrontation, made one thing perfectly clear. This wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about standing up to her completely, reclaiming my space, my dignity, and my peace. She had made it personal, and now I couldn't run. I left the store with my hands shaking, my cart heavy with steel posts, concrete, and reinforced brackets. Each piece felt like a weapon in the battle. I was about to wage a battle not against a person, but against fear itself, against the sense of power she had over me for months back home. I spread the materials across my driveway, measuring, planning, and visualizing the construction. My neighbors passed by, casting curious glances, but I didn't care. I had a mission, and nothing would stop me. Not HOA rules, not whispers, not even Karen herself. That night, I lay in bed thinking about her, about the way she had laughed in the hardware store, about the countless mornings I had spent repairing the ruins she left behind. And then a thought hit me, colder than the autumn air. She wouldn't stop. Karen didn't just harass for fun, she escalated. If I wasn't careful, the next attack might not be my mailbox. It could be my car, my yard, maybe even something more personal. And that's when the stakes became crystal clear. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. My mailbox had become the front line of a silent war. And I had to fortify it with everything I had, both physically and mentally. I realized that my emotions, fear, anger, humiliation were now tools. Every nail I hammered, every post I poured into concrete was a statement. I would not be intimidated. I would not be controlled. By the time midnight rolled around, I had a detailed plan. My mailbox would be reinforced with steel, anchored deep into concrete, and fitted with a design that would make it practically indestructible. And once it was in place, I knew she would come. She would test it, and when she did, I would be ready. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a strange thrill. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was preparing, planning, and taking back control. Karen thought she had power over me, but soon she would discover that I had something stronger than fear. I had strategy. I had determination. And I had the element of surprise. The battle lines were drawn, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next. It happened on a Tuesday evening. The sun had dipped low, painting the street in golden shadow. I was inside, sipping tea, trying to calm the storm of nerves that had been building for weeks. The new mailbox was in place, solid, reinforced, anchored deep in concrete, unyielding. Every detail had been calculated, every weakness anticipated. I had built it not just as protection, as a statement, my declaration that Karen's reign over me was over. And then I heard it dot the familiar crunch of gravel down the street. My stomach tightened immediately. I didn't even need to look. I knew that roar, that sense of impending doom. Karen's SUV, the shadow of it stretched across the sidewalk like a predator stalking its prey. I stepped onto the porch, caught hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. She slowed, as always, eyes fixed on me, a smirk playing on her lips. But this time I felt no fear, only anticipation. The mailbox was ready. I was ready till her SUV swerved. I barely had time to catch my breath before she slammed into it with full force. The sound was deafening, metal against steel, wood against concrete, but then nothing. The mailbox didn't budge an inch. Dust and small chips flew, the bumper of her SUV crumpling like paper against the immovable post. I couldn't help but feel a thrill of victory, a shiver of disbelief. It worked. My fortress had held. Karen stepped out of the car, clutching her arm, her face a mask of fury and shock. She glared at me, her jaw tight, her sunglasses now useless against the raw sunlight. I stared back, my hands trembling not from fear, but from adrenaline. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes, the tiniest crack in the armor she always wore so effortlessly. You can't. She spat, her voice shaking, venom laced with panic. This isn't allowed. I checked the rules, I said calmly, my voice steadier than I felt. Every inch is legal. Every anchor, every post. You can't touch it. And this time, you won't. Her shoulders tensed. She looked around, realizing for the first time that the neighbors who usually watched silently were now observing with wide eyes. The whispers started almost immediately. One of them muttered, "Did she just block Karen?" Another shook their head, stunned. For once, she didn't have the crowd on her side. Karen's glare shifted back to the mailbox, then to me. She stalked closer, fingers curled as if she might shove me aside, but she stopped short. Her plan had failed. My creation, built from weeks of late nights and obsessive precision, had held against her fury. And now there was nothing she could do. I felt a strange mix of triumph and exhaustion. Months of intimidation, fear, and humiliation had all led to this moment. I had expected fear, confrontation, maybe even retaliation, but nothing had prepared me for the raw, almost shocking satisfaction of seeing her stopped in her tracks. She wasn't just frustrated, she was powerless. And for the first time, I realized what that felt like. But the moment wasn't entirely mine. Karen didn't leave quietly. She stormed back to her SUV, muttering threats under her breath, her pride wounded. The engine roared, and I watched as she drove away, slamming her door and swerving angrily into the street. My neighbors were still staring, murmuring to one another. And I felt the weight of their eyes, not judgmental, but impressed, maybe even grateful. Inside, I sank into a chair, hands still shaking. Adrenaline finally giving way to fatigue. The reality hit me. This wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. This had become a turning point. I had drawn a line. I had stood my ground. And in doing so, I had changed the balance of power in this little street forever. The immediate aftermath was surreal. Karen filed a formal complaint with the HOA, claiming I had provoked her and illegally trapped her vehicle. I had anticipated it. I had every permit, every legal document, every calculation to prove my mailbox was fully compliant. When the board reviewed the situation, the look on their faces told me everything they knew who was in the right. And for the first time, the mighty Karen of the neighborhood felt the sting of authority not bending to her favor. Yet even with the victory, I couldn't relax entirely. I knew she would be scheming, plotting some new way to regain control. Maybe she'd find another target. Maybe she'd escalate differently. But one thing was certain. I had taken the first decisive step. And I had done it on my terms. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the mailbox gleaming in the moonlight. It was more than a box now. It was a symbol. A monument to the idea that even when the odds are stacked against you, and even when a manipulative, powerful force tries to break you, careful planning, courage, and determination could tip the scales. I realized something about fear, too. For months, fear had been my constant companion, lurking in every glance from Karen, every smashed mailbox, every dismissive HOA response. But now, I understood that fear could be transformed into focus, into strategy, into a driving force. It didn't have to control you, it could guide you. I didn't celebrate loudly. I didn't shout my victory from the rooftops. I simply allowed myself to breathe, to feel, to finally relax a little. Karen had underestimated me, and she had paid the price. And for the first time in a long time, I felt this strange, intoxicating mix of relief and empowerment that comes when you finally take back control of your life. The war wasn't over, far from it, but the first battle had been won, and I knew deep down that the next moves would be just as crucial. The days after the collision were surreal. Karen stayed off the street for almost a week, her SUV parked mysteriously far from my house, as if the neighborhood itself had shifted under her feet. The whispers began immediately. Neighbors who had once been silent started nodding, smiling, even waving when they saw me outside. Some shared quiet stories of their own experiences with her. It was as if the invisible wall she had built around our street had finally cracked. Letting in light and air for the first time in months, I kept a careful watch, of course. I knew better than to think the battle was completely over. Karen didn't give up easily. But the fear that had once shadowed every step I took outside my front door had lifted. The mailbox, my fortress, stood firm, gleaming quietly under the sun. It wasn't just protection for letters anymore. It was a monument to taking back my dignity, to proving that control could be wrested from even the most manipulative hands. The HOA eventually dismissed her complaint. They even called me in to review the mailbox design and the placement regulations. It's almost as if seeking validation that I had done everything by the book. I smiled politely, but inside I was amazed at the irony. The very system she had exploited to torment me had finally worked in my favor. When she finally returned, she avoided eye contact. The smirk was gone. Her usual confidence had crumbled, replaced with a careful, measured demeanor. She walked past my house, head down as though she were counting each step, afraid to make another mistake. I realized then something important. Power is fragile. When wielded through fear and manipulation, it can hold for a long time, but when challenged with calm determination and preparation, it can be stripped away almost entirely for me. The victory wasn't just about the mailbox. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, my peace, and my home. For months, I had been living under the weight of intimidation, afraid to enjoy my own space, second-guessing every move, and doubting whether I could stand up for myself. That ended the moment the reinforced post withstood her attack. That moment marked a turning point, not only in the struggle with Karen, but in the way I viewed my own strength. I began noticing subtle changes in the neighborhood, too. Others who had silently endured her control began to speak up. Complaints were voiced, boundaries were enforced, and the HOA meetings became less about intimidation and more about fairness. Karen's influence dwindled. It wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. The same neighbors who had once feared her now treated her like just another person, fallible, countable, and no longer untouchable. Looking back, I realized how much this experience had changed me. I had learned patience, strategy, and the importance of standing firm in the face of intimidation. More than that, I learned that fear can be a teacher. It showed me where my boundaries were, where my courage had to rise, and where my determination could make a real difference. I had felt powerless, humiliated, and frustrated, but I had also discovered my own ability to take control when it mattered most. And yet, there was also a subtle, unexpected lesson: revenge. While satisfying in the moment, is secondary to protection and preparation. The mailbox wasn't a weapon. It was a shield. Its strength came from careful planning, persistence, and knowledge of the rules, tools I could rely on without stooping to the cruelty Karen had wielded. I realized that true power isn't in intimidation. It's in preparation, confidence, and the courage to act decisively when the moment comes. Now, months later, the mailbox still stands. I check it every morning with a quiet smile. Not because I expect another attack, but because it reminds me of the battle I fought and won without losing myself. It reminds me that even in situations where you feel trapped, isolated, or overpowered, there is always a way to reclaim your space, your voice, and your dignity. I've also learned to observe fear differently. I no longer see it as a weakness to hide from. I see it as a signal, a guide that tells me when to act, when to plan, and when to rise. Karen thought she could break me with threats, intimidation, and her relentless control. Instead, she taught me resilience. She taught me the value of strategy, patience, and quiet strength. And in the end, that lesson was far more powerful than any mailbox could ever be. Sometimes, I catch myself watching her from the corner of my eye when she drives past. She's quieter now, cautious, almost subdued. And I realize something profound. Winning isn't about hurting someone else. It's about standing your ground, protecting what's yours, and walking away with your integrity intact. As I step outside on a bright morning, the sun glinting off the mailbox I built, I feel a calm certainty. The battle is over, the lessons are learned, and I have emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever. Fear tried to control me. Karen tried to break me. But in the end, I built something stronger, not just a mailbox, but a life I refuse to let anyone destroy. And that, I think, is the victory worth more than anything else.